Oh, I think we're live.
We are awesome.
Yeah, so I'm gonna just say hello to everybody who's joining us for this LinkedIn Live. And this is actually our first episode of teaching technologies with technologies. That's why we have this acronym T, I guess, Cube, right?
Yep, yep.
T Cube.
Yep.
What a cool way of kind of, yeah, summarize what we're trying to do. But, uh, just wanted to briefly introduce ourselves before we continue on. So my name is, the full name is Jung Woo, the last name is Ryu, but I go by Dr. J. I mean, especially with my students. So this is why we call it also, a conversation with Dr. J and my dear friend, Peggy. And I've been teaching since 2005 at Penn State. So it's been a while, and yeah, we definitely have a lot to share. That's what I think. But Peggy, would you like to introduce yourself just a little bit?
Yes, Dr. J, thank you. As mentioned, my name is Peggy Fisher, and I am also a teacher at Penn State University. Before that, I worked in industry for about 18 years. I've also taught high school, so I have some experience that I'd love to share with that as well. And now teaching back at Penn State again, and absolutely loving it.
Yeah, that's a actually very broad spectrum. I mean, like 18 years of industry experience. That's a lot, and I used to work in industry a little bit. I mean, just compared to yours. I mean, I worked for about 5 years as a software engineer. So yeah, wow. And then you also taught, high
Yeah.
school students. Wow.
I think it gives great perspective, JR, for both you and I to have had some time in industry. So when we talk to students, we
Mhm,
have live experience of what it's like to have,
mhm.
a full time job. I worked for a real large insurance company and did programming and end up as a director. But it's great to have that experience to be able to really relate to what the
Oh yeah.
students can expect. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're not just talking about theories, but we actually do IT. So that's wonderful, and we have a lot of these opportunities to interact with our students to really show, what we do on a daily basis with technology. So which is wonderful.
Yes.
So the one of the things we wanted to talk about was, why do we love IT so much? I guess. Or what do we love about IT? I guess that's more close to the topic we originally prepared. So, would you like to try that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, when JR had asked if I wanted to participate in this, it's definitely a passionate of mine. I absolutely love teaching, and then I love teaching technology even more. So, when we say that, what do we mean? So, I teach a lot of programming, all different languages, all different levels. I teach also discrete math, and I've taught other math courses as well. I love the fact that the subject matter that we're teaching has endless possibilities.
Mhm.
Today we're teaching Java, but tomorrow maybe I'll teach Python. Maybe I'll teach a little Scala, do some machine language. There's always more to learn, and JR and I both share a passion for continued learning. We both love to learn new things. it I also love teaching technology because I love to share my the joy of programming. It sounds silly for me to say that. Maybe it sounds like a cookbook, right? The joy of programming. But I do. I love programming, and a lot of people think of programming as difficult or only for, yeah, sorry to stereotype here, but only for boys or men. And it's not. It's like every day that I program is like a puzzle that I try to solve, and I love solving puzzles, and I love watching students that start out with either a fear or I'm not going to like this, a preconceived conception about
Right.
programming. And I love to watch that light bulb go off, and then all of a sudden they're like showing me things that I didn't know.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so those are things that I love about teaching
Yeah.
IT.
Yeah, and I agree with you on everything you said. And I mean, I love learning myself, and I think IT is a perfect place where you can do lots of learning because it's very dynamic. I mean, things are changing all the time, and what you know today may be outdated tomorrow. So, in that sense, I think it just gives you a lot of opportunities to learn. It's also, I think, very nice for people who are very curious like me. So, it's like every day is an adventure, right? So, we're explorers pretty much in this IT world, ever changing. And in that sense, I think IT just makes us get really excited every day, all the time. So that's, I think, what we love about IT. And we also wanted to talk a little bit about, why we're doing the show, LinkedIn Live. And let me actually, uh, yeah, share a secret here, which is which is Peggy and I. We've been friends for a long, long time, but just like what happens to everybody, we get busy with what we do every day, and we don't really get to talk to each other and so on. So I wanted to get rid of an excuse, and I wanted to do something routine with Peggy. I mean, that's kind of a hidden agenda I have for this show. So by having these shows with Peggy, I get to see her at least, I guess, every month or something like that. So that's one of the reasons.
Oh, that's great, JR. And I feel the same way. JR and I do share a lot of passion for teaching and technology. As a matter of fact, JR got me involved with some summer camps where at the Altoona campus for Penn
Hmm.
State University, we do a lot where we try and teach technology to middle school students, middle school girls, sometimes a mix of
Hmm.
girls and boys. And working with JR is always is so much fun. And we are always able to get things to work out, and even though we face some challenges sometimes, and we've actually worked on a couple other projects together, one about augmented reality and learning environments, and we also both have worked together with creating some courses for LinkedIn Learning, which is just fantastic.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
So
I also really enjoy working with you,
we
JR.
share a lot.
You
There's
do.
definitely, yeah, something special about us kind of sharing our experiences working together and those types of things. And it's also interesting because I taught this course like way back. I mean, I don't know how many years ago, maybe like several years ago. And the way I got to know Peggy is really that she was my instructional designer for that course.
Oh,
Is that,
that's
do you remember Peggy?
I forgot. Oh my God, that was, I do remember.
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
since then, I've seen
yeah.
kind of the transition. So she,
Oh,
became an instructor. She actually was hired full time by LinkedIn Learning, and
yeah.
then she's now back to Penn State. So yeah, we definitely, yeah,
Oh, that's so funny,
share a
JR.
lot of experiences together. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. As instructional designer, it was when we were first starting to put videos out into the some of the courses that we had at Penn State for our online programs, and it was wonderful. JR was a great teacher, and yeah, I completely forgot that we worked on
yeah.
that. That was
The one of the labs we worked on, I remember, is actually buffer overflow lab, which
I
was
was gonna
very.
say, you
See,
know,
I remember all these things.
oh my gosh. JR, that is so funny because that is one of those things that I absolutely will always remember. I love your buffer overflow example because I always, well, my background is COBOL, right? So
Yeah.
when you're dealing with COBOL, you end up with it's with overflow quite a bit, you
Yeah.
know.
Oh, yeah. I'm
And
sure.
and it just you have to print out a dump, which is literally this many pages.
Hmm.
And we used to have a gentleman that would go through it and look for the overflow, and your like your lab there was perfect because it showed students in live how that works and what it looks like and what to look for. That's the best lab. I love
It
it.
was also like a very elaborate one too, because we
Yes,
we were actually able to execute a piece of code through the buffer overflow. So that
that's
was, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
very, very neat
Oh,
lab,
you just brought up
hands-on
a lot
lab.
of great
Yeah.
memories. That's good.
Yeah, it's bringing back all these good memories, which is great. Yeah.
Yep.
And so the next item we wanted to talk about was like why, I mean, why we're doing the show. I mean, we talked about, I guess, personal motivations a little bit, but
Yeah,
I think people are more interested in what the goal or goals of the show is. So that's something I wanted to talk about with you.
absolutely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Would
Yeah.
you like to share your thoughts on that a little bit?
Sure. Just like with our courses that we did for LinkedIn Learning, like you and I both really think that sharing our knowledge with other people is an important idea.
Mhm,
And also, I think it helps inspire us too by sharing these.
mhm,
So sharing our experiences, but in teaching technologies with technologies
mhm,
is, I think we're hoping to, one, to share what we know, but two, to hear from others and hear how are they using technologies? What are some ways that have worked, or what are some things people have tried but maybe didn't work?
mhm. Yeah, and something I wanna add to that is also it's like perfectly possible for somebody to teach technologies without technologies, because I mean you can just talk about theories forever, and that's when I think students get a little bored. And I think when it comes to the reality, I think a lot of times what industry or the companies are looking for is doers, people who can actually do things. So in that sense, I mean, especially when it comes to teaching technologies, it's critical for us to equip our students with these abilities to actually do things. Not just knowing
Absolutely.
knowing the information, but also putting the information to action. I think is really the key, and that's one of the reasons why we want to really emphasize in our show, especially the hands-on aspect of IT.
Yeah, I'm
Mm,
looking
yeah.
forward to some of our future sessions where we get into more details on teaching, pedagogy, and also some of the things that we have done in the classroom. But even before that, when
Mhm.
I said that I did teach at the high school level, and I really found that when you're standing in front of a group of high school students and you're lecturing about pointers in C sharp,
Oh,
or
yeah.
in C++, you see a lot of glazed over eyes. So how do you get that to how do you get it so that they can relate, so that
Mhm.
they're interested in understanding? How do you get through to them?
That's
And just one example that kind of rings to mind
mhm,
is, there's a lot of resources out there that we might not know about, but
mhm.
this one was a partnership with Microsoft where I was able to get support from Microsoft to teach my students a programming language called XNA, which
Mhm.
was a gaming language. So
Uh,
they created games. And so I went from glazed over to,
mhm.
what else can I try? How about the controller so I can make sure my program works?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
JR, you're so right when you said that, though, because lecturing about technology, you might get through to a few students, but the majority of students, and I'm included, are going to walk away like, what was that? And I don't remember anything that was said. But if instead, if it's more interactive, if the students are problem solving on their
Mhm,
own or with help from you,
mhm,
and they're doing labs where they actually have to write code,
mhm,
you're going to have a lot better retention.
mhm. Oh, yeah, there's that, and I think the learning is also even more effective. So in that sense, I think, yeah, it's pretty much an imperative in this case. That's how
Yeah.
I would put it. And I think another point I want to make is also like a lot of times, we're very passionate about these things, but sometimes it's difficult to let kind of passion shine through all the, kinds of things we're trying to do in the classroom. So that's something important for us to kind of brainstorm together, because it may be projected as something very like convoluted and students may not get it. So how do we really translate our passion into something concrete so that students really relate to us and they kind of resonate with what we're trying to do in the classroom? So in that sense, I think having this type of conversation is really important. I think we have a comment,
Yeah,
viewer
we
comment.
have our first comment, Kyle.
Yay! Yeah,
Um,
so Kyle So
Kyle Margo is a former student of mine at the high
oh,
school.
is that right? Oh,
Yeah.
exciting.
Kyle, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. That's wonderful. And it's so nice to hear that you agree with what we're saying. And it's hard sometimes to figure out how to make it interactive, but I think it's important.
Yeah, he's saying that I can attest to that, making a big difference. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And like a lot of times when I ask my students, like, what is your favorite part of this course? They all say mostly all the time, oh, that hands-on lab we did, and
Yeah.
very memorable, those types of things. So
Absolutely.
guess what? It's been
What?
already 15 minutes.
Oh my goodness. I thought it was
half
probably
half
pretty
of our time is up, so we need to, yeah, keep moving. So the next half was going to be dedicated to our discussion on the different aspects of this teaching technologies with technologies episodes in the future we're trying to actually cover. So what are we trying to cover in the future episodes? That's sort of the goal of our conversation today, to introduce what we're going to try to do and also try to get your feedback on that. So like your feedback regarding what they want us to be covering in our future episodes. So
Yeah, we
let's,
definitely would
yeah.
love to hear about what other people are doing. And that would be awesome. And if anybody has any questions about what we're doing, we'd be happy to hear that as well.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, and I think another thing is it's not probably just two of us talking all the time. Maybe we will be able to invite some guests, and that will probably make things even more exciting.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
before we delve into that part of our conversation today, I want to make a quick disclaimer, which is this. And this is kind of my philosophy about teaching technologies with teaching, which is, I mean, teaching technologies with technologies, not teaching. But that is really that, I mean, nothing really matters, whether we teach technologies with technologies. It doesn't really matter if you're not able to really show our genuine care for the students. Yeah, I mean, you can do hundreds of labs, hands-on labs, but if you're like a robot and if you don't really show your care, compassion for the students, I mean, I don't think it's going to be effective. So that's, I think, something I want to really emphasize before we talk about these, aspects of teaching technologies with technologies.
Yeah, I can second that, JR. I'm glad you brought that up. And for those of you that are listening, if any of you had to deal with the COVID year, you know how difficult it was to show students that you care when you're not in the classroom with them anymore, when everything is virtual. It took a lot of rethinking on how can I, like JR said, how can I let the students know that they're not just doing these labs because someone created a lesson plan somewhere. It's because I reviewed it. I believe this is going to help you with your learning, and I am willing to help you. So I'm glad you said that. That's definitely a big part of my teaching is really trying to get to know the students and letting them know I care.
I'm glad that we're on the same page.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
I mean, I suspected that, but
Definitely.
yeah. So the very first one we want to cover is student engagement, because just like what Peggy just said, during the pandemic, I mean, it's still going on. I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest things we are trying to accomplish is to engage our students, and this is even without pandemic. We always try to engage our students in the classroom, and it's probably a little easier in the classroom because you have the students right there. If they're like yawning, you can see their facial
Tired,
facial
bored.
expression and try to maybe come up with some kind of a joke to wake up the students or something like that. But when you have these windows, like let's say we're doing a conference call and everybody disabled all their cameras, I mean, you cannot tell what they're thinking, and it's almost like, I mean, literally talking to a, I mean, digital brick wall kind of thing.
Yeah, that's so, I like that analogy. That's really good. Yeah, yeah.
So we want to explore that a little more by maybe talking to the experts, talking to each other, and how we can even make things more engaging,
Yeah.
even with technologies as mundane as something like email, right? I
Mhm.
mean, how do we spice up our email? I mean, there should be a way to do that, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
in
yeah.
my case, it's like using some kind of an emoji or maybe incorporate some audio visual type of things. I try to actually include some of these pictures. I think so. One of the hobbies I have is taking pictures and those types of things. So trying to make it a little more visual. I'm just giving you an example here,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that way students, I don't know, at least pay a little more attention.
Yeah. JR, if I could just add a real quick analogy. When like I said, when I worked in industry, this is going to kind of give away some of my age, but I was around when email first started. And
Ah,
we had something called Lotus Notes,
oh,
and
I
it was
remember
funny
that.
because yeah, and people just weren't used to it. A lot of people were not tech savvy. I mean, I dealt with mainframes, so a lot of people, especially when it came to email. And I'll never forget when email first came out, where a colleague of mine got an email and was upset because she felt that the person who sent it was yelling at her because that person used all caps for the entire email.
Oh, yeah.
But it's funny because it turns out that the sender just was not a good typist, could not do the capital and then lowercase, and
Mhm.
this was common back then. People
Oh,
didn't use a typewriter or they didn't use a keyboard, that's for sure.
mhm.
And so it's also something to keep in mind. Like you said, we want to try and make sure that we are communicating, and but sometimes you have to be careful about your communication. But
Oh,
I always
yeah.
never forget that story. It was so funny.
Yeah, I think we have to be definitely more mindful about our email and what we're sending to the students. And I think one of the complaints I hear a lot is that all students never check, the emails I send to them. And I think one way to address that is probably to make the email more interesting, more
Yeah.
useful, and I don't know, putting some more spice into it. I don't know. There may be something we can do,
Yep.
to
Yep.
improve
Cool.
that. Yeah. So the second aspect we want to cover is, building this kind of a learner community when we're teaching. And how do we do that with technologies? And I think there are a lot of tools out there that could help us with building a learner community with students. And I mean, one thing that comes to my mind immediately is something like, social media.
Mm.
But there is also a way to avoid using something like Facebook, public social media, because some of these institutions they offer their own like corporate version of, I would say, social media.
Mhm.
And I think we use something called Yammer in our case, or Microsoft Teams and those types of things. So that's just an idea, but what do you think of this?
Yeah, I think it's great. I know that some of my classes, some of my students take the initiative to talk to each other, which I think is great through Discord or GroupMe or things like that. But I would love to also have a way for teacher interaction, for adding the teacher to it.
Mhm,
Teams, I think, is going to be it. I enjoy Teams as a platform,
mhm,
and I think that would be good. It's a great way to send a quick response or send a quick chat to somebody, and you don't have to be online to see it later.
mhm.
So I think it's great, JR. I think it's really
Yeah.
good, and it
Mhm.
might allow you to get the pulse of the class at any point in time and say, like, is everybody struggling? Nobody's turned in the assignment. Is everybody having trouble, or what's going on?
Yeah, and I think it's easier to use something like chat instead of
Yeah.
emails, and you just do a quick text and then
Yeah.
your instructors right there to see it. So
Yeah.
that improves
Exactly.
accessibility, which is great always. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, moving on to the next one, which is more effective content delivery. And yeah, I mean, there are many options to do that, I know. And I mean, just I guess an example I can think of right now is something like Zoom, for example, because it has so many different features we're not probably using. And one of the things, I think underused is something like breakout sessions. But I know people are using other instructors are using breakout sessions a lot, and that seems to be making a difference there too. So, and also another aspect of it is how you use it, I guess too.
Yeah.
So there may be some of these secret sauce type of thing out there.
Mm, yeah.
You may be able to share in using how to use in using something like breakout sessions more effectively. I say.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a great, it's kind of ironic, but this was a great way to get a whole bunch of people to use Zoom at one time. And
Mm,
now we can regroup and say, okay, now that we did that,
mm,
what ways did you find to make, because, before it was always optional. Yeah, we have this Zoom thing here over in the side if you ever want to do it.
mm,
But this past year, so many people had to use it with their classroom.
mm,
I tried using polls. I found out how to import a poll from Excel, which made my life a lot easier because I could create it in Excel a lot easier than I could in the Zoom session
mm,
itself. And then I can reuse it as well.
mm,
But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that there's a lot that hopefully other people can help me with. That they'll be able to say,
mm.
this is how I did my breakout session.
Yeah, and especially if you're doing your course more like inquiry based, you know,
Yeah.
and you pose a question, have students work on the question, and let them present. I think that's a great way to deliver your content. I mean,
Yep.
that way students are a little more involved and engaged.
Yep.
So we're just brainstorming right now, but moving on to the next one, I think is using technologies to go beyond just covering materials. So again, I think to me a big thing is how to show our care, how to show our love, for our students. I think how do we do that using technologies? I mean, it may be as simple as having a, I don't know, weekly call, conference call, video call with the students and make yourself available.
Yeah.
And let me just share a funny story because I tried to do that with some of my online students. And I think the timing is really critical there because I think I picked something like Saturday, 8 p.m., and nobody showed up.
They're all out having dinner.
Oh, maybe I did that on purpose. Oh, no.
There you
So, yeah,
go.
I think
Oh.
it'll be interesting to look into those types of things because, I think there has to be a way to do that.
One quick thing, and I know we're getting close to being out of time, and I definitely don't want to run over,
Yeah.
but one thing that I have found very effective is to use video feedback on student submissions.
Mhm.
And because I do that, I use their name, I walk through their code with them, and then I record the video and then I email it or send it to them in some fashion. But I think they feel that connection because I'm talking directly to them. And
Right, right.
it's time consuming, but it's worth it.
Yeah, yeah. So we have a couple minutes to go. Oh my gosh, time just flew by like that.
Yeah. Done.
Yeah, couple more minutes to go here, and I think we want to kind of conclude our session here by asking you to send us some of the input you have regarding what you want us to cover in the future. We really look forward to hearing from you about what you need. So I think something like that will be really interesting, and who knows, we may even do a poll, right? So we can
Yeah.
send out a quick LinkedIn poll, and maybe some of you can respond to the poll.
Yeah,
But
we'd be happy to try and find other experts to join the show. And if you're someone who is watching who would like to join in the conversation, we're always open to that as well.
mm,
And it looks like we have another comment,
mhm.
and I really like this one. It says
Okay.
shy and introverted students seem to participate more in class via chat, and
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's a great observation, and I have noticed it as well. When I ask a question, that if I say just enter your answer in the chat, I will get a lot more responses than if I ask people to turn their video on and give me their answer. So
Yeah, yeah. Believe or not, I think I need to make a kind of disclosure right now. I'm an introvert, so and yeah, something like
I'm
chat
an
is
extrovert.
great.
So we make a good.
Something like that is great,
It
and
is.
yeah,
It really is. Yeah.
even like when you have a meeting, sometimes it's just difficult to sort of cut in or participate because they're like extroverts out there
Yeah.
talking all the time.
Oh, we're out
So
of time. Thank you, everybody.
yeah.
Oh, it doesn't, I wasn't sure if it was going to cut us off.
No, 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 not yet. Until I press the button
Okay.
and broadcast. So we still have a little bit of time, but thank you for joining us today. And I really had a good time with Peggy, and that's really the point of
Yeah.
this show, Peggy and JR, talking about
Peggy and JR show.
teaching technologies with technologies. T Cube. Peggy, would you like to say anything before we
I just I can't
end the
thank
show?
Kyle enough for writing a comment and joining the call. That meant a lot to me. Thank you, Kyle, and Kim as well, and JR. I really look forward. I hope that this inspired some people to join us in the future and to let us know of topics that you'd like to hear about. So
Wonderful.
it was great. Thanks,
Thank
JR.
you. Thank you. See you next time.
Okay. Bye, everybody.